It was 3:47 a.m. when the echo of wheels rolling across polished concrete broke the stillness of the Tesla Design Center's West Corridor. The building, designed to impress in the daylight, became something else entirely at night, quiet, solemn, almost sacred in its silence. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Security cameras hummed quietly. But aside from the occasional distant buzz of a server cooling system, the world felt asleep. Except for him. His name was Leo. He was 63. Most people didn't know that. To them, he was just the janitor. The one who always seemed to be around, but never quite in the way. They didn't know about the limp he tried to hide, or that he spoke 4 languages, or that he used to build model ships before his hands began to shake. They didn't know that he watched everything, not out of obligation, but out of instinct. Because when you've been invisible long enough, you learn to observe everything that moves. Tonight, he moved slower than usual. His cart rattled slightly as he turned into the north wing. His knees ached more these days, and the pills weren't helping like they used to. But he wasn't thinking about pain. He was thinking about the note in his pocket. It was folded 3 times. Thick paper, the kind that absorbs ink with a softness that demands care. He had written it over the course of weeks, line by line, never rushed. Because it wasn't just a goodbye letter. It was everything he'd never said. Leo had worked in that building for nearly 8 years. He'd seen prototypes rise and fall, seen faces change, teams dissolve, entire concepts scrapped and rebuilt from scratch. But one thing had remained constant: Elon Musk. The man himself. The one people spoke of with awe, frustration, reverence, and sometimes even fear. Leo didn't fear him, not because he was brave, but because he had nothing to prove. He had cleaned Elon's personal office hundreds of times. Always after hours, always quietly. He had noticed the worn edge of the man's standing desk, the dog-eared books on the side shelf, the sketch of a rocket folded and slipped behind a family photo. Elon wasn't a mystery to him. He was human, and that made all the difference. Tonight would be the last time Leo wheeled his cart down those glossy hallways. He hadn't told anyone. No farewell email, no cake, no fanfare, just the note. He turned the corner and stopped in front of the frosted glass door that read E. Musk, Private Workspace. The door wasn't locked. It never was. Inside, the office smelled like ozone and coffee grounds. The lighting was dim. A soft glow from the screensaver danced across the wall, a simulation of stars drifting quietly in space. Leo walked in slowly, his steps muffled by the carpet. He set the trash bin down, replaced the liner, adjusted the angle of the rug that always curled at one corner. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the envelope. He placed it on the desk, right in the center. Then he stood still for a moment, just breathing. And then something unexpected happened. The door opened, and Elon walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not at that hour, not on that night. But there he was, gray t-shirt, dark circles under his eyes, a look of distant calculation etched into his face. He froze when he saw Leo. The 2 men stared at each other for a beat too long. Then Elon nodded. "Hey." Leo returned the nod. "Evening." They hadn't spoken much before. Maybe a dozen words over all the years. Elon moved past him and toward the desk. He reached for the envelope before noticing the name handwritten across the front. For Elon, "Before I go." He looked back at Leo. "Go." Leo smiled softly. "Yeah, I'm done." A pause. Something shifted in Elon's eyes. "You're quitting." Leo nodded once. "Time to go." Elon studied him, really studied him, for what felt like the first time. The tired hands, the slouched shoulders, the quiet dignity of a man who had spent years holding the building together in silence. And he didn't know why, but his throat felt tight. He held the envelope in both hands as if it weighed more than it should. "You mind if I read it now?" Elon asked. Leo gestured toward the chair. "It's yours." So Elon opened the envelope and began to read, almost cautiously, as if he sensed the contents might not just be words, but a kind of mirror. The paper was thick, slightly textured, and it crackled faintly as he unfolded it. Leo stood off to the side, not fidgeting, not pacing, just waiting, as though watching someone read your soul wasn't the most vulnerable act in the world. The first line read, "This is not a resignation." Elon paused, then read on, "This is a thank you for what you didn't know you gave me." His eyes flicked upward toward Leo briefly, but the older man's gaze remained steady, unmoved. I've watched people come and go through these walls. Some brilliant, some lost, some chasing something they couldn't name. I watched them bring their best and leave their worst. But I kept showing up, because this place, your place, let me stay invisible. And some days, that's what I needed to survive. Elon's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the page. I don't know what you remember about me, if anything. I know most people don't look down when they walk past a janitor, but I remember everything. I remember the day you dropped your phone and said, "Thanks," when I picked it up. You didn't know I was watching you cry that morning by the window, holding your son's drawing. I remember wiping the blood off the bathroom tile after that engineer fainted in the stall. I remember when you stayed overnight and walked barefoot through the hallway like a ghost. You looked tired in a way no sleep could fix. Elon blinked. His heart was beginning to thump heavier. I'm not a genius. I never finished college. I was cleaning floors while you were launching rockets. But I've studied people longer than most. And I want to tell you something before I go. You are more than your ideas. You are more than your ambition. And the world doesn't need another invention. It needs you to remember what it feels like to be seen. He stopped reading, just stared at the page, motionless. Leo, still standing across the room, spoke softly for the first time in minutes. I wrote it because I thought you might forget. And sometimes the quiet ones remember what the loud world teaches us to ignore. Elon looked up, something raw flickering behind his eyes. Why now? Leo exhaled. Because I want to rest. And I wanted to leave behind more than trash bags. They stood in silence. Not awkward, not uncertain, just full. Finally, Elon stood, walked across the room, and extended his hand. Thank you, Leo. Leo took it. Firm grip, gentle shake, no pretense. As Elon let go, he said, "You ever write before?" Leo half smiled. "Not since my wife passed." "You should." Leo nodded. "Maybe I will." And then, just before turning to leave, Leo looked back and said, "You remember that sketch of the rocket tucked behind the picture of your kids?" Elon nodded slowly. "You should build that one. Not because it'll change the world, but because you drew it when you still believed in wonder." Then he left, and Elon, still holding the note, stood in the quiet after his departure, unsure if he wanted to sit, speak, or cry. Before we continue, if you've made it this far, it means the story is already speaking to something deeper. So if you'd like to be part of a space where stories breathe, grow, and mean something, Glowing Star, consider subscribing. Not because we ask, but because you feel it's worth it. And if this chapter stirred something in you, drop a comment below. What's one quiet act of kindness that changed your day once? We'd love to hear it. Now back to our story. After Leo left, Elon didn't move for a long time. The note sat open in his hands, edges slightly curled from the pressure of his fingers. The air in the office had changed. He could feel it. It wasn't colder or warmer, just heavier, like the room had decided to stop pretending. He walked slowly back to the desk and placed the letter down gently, as if it were something fragile. And maybe it was, because those words, "You are more than your ambition," kept ringing through him like a frequency he hadn't tuned into in years. He lowered himself into his chair and leaned back. And for once, he didn't check his phone, didn't open his laptop, didn't rush into distraction. He just sat there. The soft hum of the building seemed louder now. The distant buzz of electronics, the occasional pop from a vent, everything that had always been background noise had come forward. And it made him realize how long it had been since he had actually heard anything. He looked around his office differently now. The framed sketches, the awards, the artifacts of a life built around forward motion. And suddenly, They all looked like echoes, loud things left behind by someone running too fast to hear them bounce back. He stood and walked to the corner shelf, pulling out an old photograph. It was one of the first Falcon 1 launches, back when failure was expected and hope was loud. He ran his thumb across the frame, remembering the long nights, the fear, the disbelief that something so big could come from people who felt so small. Leo had seen all of it, from the margins, from the shadows. How had Elon never realized? He sat back down and reached again for the letter. Reading it a second time was worse, because this time he felt it. Every observation, every small moment Leo had carried. It was like looking into a mirror that didn't care about titles or press releases. A mirror that remembered the parts of you that even you forgot to hold on to. And beneath the shame was something else. A flicker of something unnameable. Not sadness, not regret, something closer to awe. That a man who mopped floors could leave him speechless, not with a bold demand or dramatic gesture, but with quiet attention. A kind of attention that had seen him more clearly than most ever had. He turned to his laptop, slowly, and opened a new blank document. No title, no format, and he began to write. Today, I was reminded that presence is more powerful than invention. That the people who clean up after us often carry what we leave behind, not just the physical, but the emotional. I don't know how to repay that, but I know I want to try. He stopped, saved it as Leo Letter 1, and sat back. His inbox blinked, his schedule chirped, but he didn't move, because for the first time in a long time, Elon Musk wasn't thinking about what was next. He was thinking about what had already been missed. The next morning, the Tesla Design Center buzzed back to life as if nothing had changed. Engineers returned with earbuds in, styluses in hand, and to-do lists glowing on their tablets. The same low murmur of conversation filled the corridors, talk of production targets, supplier bottlenecks, code delays. The rhythm of ambition resumed. But for Elon, something had shifted. He walked through the halls slower than usual, nodding absently to greetings, pausing a second longer at the doors he usually brushed past. It wasn't obvious to anyone, but inside it felt like he was seeing the building for the first time, with Leo's eyes. He found himself in one of the smaller design labs, a room mostly used for whiteboard sessions and prototype brainstorming. It was empty, the lights motion-activated, still flickering to full brightness as he stepped inside. On the central wall, someone had wiped the board clean overnight, leaving behind only a faint residue of ideas. Elon reached for a marker and wrote one word in thick black strokes. Leo. He stared at it, and beside the name, he drew a rectangle, a crude shape. No title, no bullet points. Then he wrote in smaller letters, "What are we missing?" Not in the sense of a gap in the market, but in the sense of a gap in them. He didn't realize he was still holding the marker until a junior designer walked in, stopped in her tracks, and said, "Good morning." Elon turned, half startled. "Hey." She pointed toward the board. "Leo." He nodded. "Do you know him?" The woman smiled faintly. "The janitor? Yeah. He used to leave extra paper towels for me when I worked late. Even remember my birthday once. Never said much. Just noticed everything." Elon nodded, a new kind of clarity unfolding in his mind. Later that day, he called a brief meeting. Not of executives or directors, just a handful of people who worked all over the building. A tech, a maintenance lead, a front desk assistant, a junior developer. When they arrived, they looked confused. No slide decks, no agenda. Just Elon, sitting in one of the conference chairs like any other employee. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. "I want to ask you about someone who worked here for almost a decade and never made a headline." He didn't need to say the name. They all knew. The stories began. One person said Leo used to stack notebooks left behind in meeting rooms and return them to the desks where he thought they belonged. Another said he once taped a charger back together with duct tape and left a note that read, "Wasn't ready to give up on this yet." Someone else said Leo fixed the microwave in the break room with a screwdriver and a coat hanger. Every memory was quiet. None were dramatic. But together, they painted a picture of someone who had done what most people never do, leave meaning behind in the spaces between. By the end of the meeting, Elon leaned forward and said, "What if we did something for him?" Not because he asked, but because we finally noticed. No one disagreed. That night, Elon returned to his office. The note was still on his desk. He unfolded it again, reading the last line over and over. You don't have to build something to change someone. Sometimes you just have to stay long enough for them to feel seen. The whiteboard with Leo's name stayed untouched for 3 days. Elon didn't erase it. No one did. In fact, something unusual began happening. Someone added a sticky note below the question he'd written. He fixed the jam printer in 2019 and never said a word. Another one appeared a few hours later. He gave me coffee when I cried in the parking lot. Didn't ask why. By the end of the second day, the whiteboard had turned into a collage of neon paper, hand-scribbled notes, and even a few tiny drawings. No title, no instructions, no branding, just the quiet unfolding of stories no one had ever thought to share until now. Someone taped a photo of Leo sweeping the West Corridor, taken candidly from behind. Below it, someone wrote, "The man who stayed while the rest of us ran." When Elon saw the board again that night, he stood frozen in front of it. He read every note, every name, every memory. He didn't say anything. But the next morning, something else happened. An email went out, not from PR, not from HR, from Elon. Simple subject line. Who else have we missed? In the body, it just said, "We spend our lives building things. What if we also took a moment to build acknowledgement?" He attached a photo of the whiteboard and said, "If someone here made your world quieter, better, easier, even in the smallest way, share it. We'll make room for it." What followed was unexpected. Not just a few replies. Hundreds. Stories about cafeteria workers who remembered allergies. Security guards who stood a little longer when someone seemed off. A woman in accounting who brought extra granola bars for interns who skipped lunch. Elon had started many projects, but none had ever made him cry in the elevator before. That same day, he asked a facilities manager to repurpose one of the older lounges. No announcement, no design committee, just a simple directive. Clear the walls, leave markers and notepads. No Wi-Fi, call it the Leo room. Within a week, it was full of color. Not sleek presentations or prototypes, but poems, letters, scribbles, thank you notes, paper cranes, a small sculpture made from a broken circuit board and copper wire, someone titled "Unseen Hands." On one corner of the room, someone framed a quote that had become a sort of anthem. You don't have to build something to change someone. When Elon walked in for the first time, the room was empty. Just him, the faint scent of coffee and wood polish in the air. He sat down and breathed. It felt like the first breath he'd taken in years that hadn't been meant for running. It was a space built not for results, but for reminders. And he knew in that moment, Leo hadn't just left behind a note. He had left a blueprint for something deeper than innovation. He had taught a place built for speed how to slow down, just enough to see one another again. Elon found himself wandering the factory floors in a way he never had before. Each morning now, before diving into meetings or emails, he took a slow, deliberate walk through Tesla's production corridors. Instead of the brisk, focused march of a CEO with 100 fires to put out, his steps were unhurried. He noticed things, the gentle clank of tools being set down, the distant hum of machinery, the way sunlight pooled on the concrete through high windows. More importantly, he noticed people. A software engineer rubbing tired eyes over a cup of coffee, a line worker gently teasing a newer coworker to lift their spirits, a security guard stretching his legs after a long shift. Elon paused at these moments, offering quiet nods and soft good mornings where before there might have been only a distracted wave. Inside, he felt something unfurling, a curiosity about lives that had long operated in the periphery of his vision, and a humble wonder at the richness he'd been missing. In these wanderings, Elon began to engage in small, unexpected conversations. One day, he stopped as a custodial worker was buffing the lobby floor. Elon waited until the whir of the machine died down, then stepped forward, "How's your day going?" he asked gently. The older man nearly jumped. He had seen Elon pass by countless times, but never exchange more than a quick hello. Recovering, the janitor smiled and spoke about the morning's routine, and Elon listened. Really listened. He asked the man's name, it was Roberto, and repeated it, as if committing it to memory. He inquired how long Roberto had been with the company, and learned it was nearly a decade. "I appreciate what you do here," Elon said quietly, startling them both with the admission. Roberto's eyes shimmered with gratitude as he nodded. As Elon walked on, he realized his heart felt just a little fuller than before. Similar scenes played out in the cafeteria line, where Elon would chat with the servers about the meals they prepared, or on the assembly line, where he'd ask technicians about their families or hobbies. These weren't grand, performative gestures, just small pockets of genuine connection. Each time, Elon walked away with new insights. One employee was taking night classes in engineering, another was worried about a sick parent, a third proudly showed him a photo of a newborn son. Every story, every face, anchored Elon more firmly in the present reality of his company, the human reality that Leo's letter had jarred awake. His leadership style subtly began to shift. In meetings, Elon found himself less impatient for the bottom line and more attuned to the people in the room. Where he once might have briskly cut off an engineer's faltering update, now he let them find their words. He noticed nerves, stress, even fear in some voices, emotions he had often overlooked in the relentless drive to solve problems. Today, in a design review, when a young designer stumbled through a presentation, Elon did something that surprised everyone. He gently placed a hand on the conference table and said, "Take your time. We're all learning here." A silence settled, not tense, but calm. The designer took a breath and continued, this time more steadily. Around the table, managers exchanged glances. This was a new Elon, or perhaps one rediscovering a long-buried part of himself. After the meeting, as people filed out, one executive lingered and murmured to Elon, "That was well handled. Different, but good." Elon only nodded, a reflective look on his face. He realized that demonstrating a bit of patience and empathy not only eased others' anxiety, it made him feel more at peace with himself as well. Word of these small moments spread quietly through the company grapevine. Tesla had always been fast-paced, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. But now a gentle ripple moved through its culture, almost imperceptible at first. Teams found subtle ways to slow down and acknowledge one another. An engineer, inspired by the stories in the Leo room, started bringing in fresh bagels on Fridays for her team, just as a simple act of kindness with no fanfare. A project manager began opening team huddles by asking if everyone was doing okay, really meaning it, and sharing a personal tidbit to encourage others to do the same. In one department, a supervisor placed a small placard on her desk that read, "Be someone's Leo." The phrase caught on like a mantra whispered from desk to desk. Its origin was by now company lore. Leo, the janitor whose quiet departure and heartfelt note to Elon had touched them all, had sparked an awakening. Be someone's Leo became an internal shorthand for going the extra mile in kindness without seeking recognition. In emails and chats, employees began to sign off with the phrase, half joking but heartfelt. One afternoon, Elon stepped onto an elevator and overheard two interns talking. One mentioned staying late to help a colleague meet a deadline, and the other smiled and said, "Ah, you were being someone's Leo, huh?" They both laughed softly as the doors opened. They froze when they saw their CEO beside them. How long had he been there? Elon just gave a warm, understanding smile and said, "I love that. Keep it up," as he exited. The interns beamed for the rest of the day. Elon often found himself lost in thought during these days, not the furious, problem-solving kind of thinking, but a gentler reflection. Sometimes in the middle of a hectic day, he would stop by the Leo room, which had quickly filled with more notes and letters from employees. Each time he visited, there were new stories tacked to the bulletin boards, a thank you note from a young engineer to a mentor who had guided her, a recollection by a factory worker of the time colleagues quietly donated vacation hours when his wife was ill, a simple index card with the words, "You matter more than you know," pinned anonymously. Elon would run his fingers lightly over these papers, marveling at the ecosystem of goodwill that had thrived here unbeknownst to him. It was humbling. He realized that while he had been driving innovation in the spotlight, people like Leo had been sustaining the heart of the company in the shadows. On one visit, he noticed someone had left a small framed quote in the room: "No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted." Elon stood there reading it over and over, feeling the truth of those ancient words settle into him. In quiet moments like this, he sensed Leo's presence as a gentle nudge in his conscience, a reminder of the kind of leader, the kind of person he aspired to be. Late one evening, long after most had gone home, Elon wandered to a part of the factory he rarely visited, the janitorial staff's locker room. He wasn't entirely sure what drew him there, perhaps a need to walk in Leo's footsteps one more time to understand the spaces Leo had moved through daily. The hallway leading there was dimly lit and silent, far from the bright bustle of daytime. Elon pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside, the scent of cleaning agents and mild soap lingering in the air. Rows of metal lockers lined the walls, and a few wooden benches stood empty. In the hush, Elon could almost imagine Leo and his colleagues here, laughing quietly or swapping stories at the end of a long shift, hanging up their uniforms with tired, proud hands. He moved slowly, almost reverently, until he reached a locker at the end with a small label that read Leo R in neat black letters. His throat tightened at the sight of it. Carefully, Elon opened Leo's locker, the hinges creaking softly. Inside, it was mostly empty. Leo had cleaned out, as was protocol when leaving. But as the overhead light flickered, Elon noticed something on the top shelf. In the shadowy corner lay a small leather-bound notebook, edges worn from years of handling. Elon reached up and took it down with trembling hands. This was no company log or official document. It looked personal. He hesitated, heart pounding in the quiet. The notebook fell open in his palms, revealing pages of slanted, careful handwriting. By all indications, this was something Leo had written for himself, thoughts, reflections, maybe even a private diary, never meant for anyone else's eyes. Elon realized in a breathless moment that Leo had unintentionally left behind a piece of his own soul. Standing there in the deserted locker room, Elon felt a wave of emotion well up as he gently turned the first page, preparing to finally meet the inner voice of the man who had changed his life. Elon sat alone in his office, the factory humming in the distance like a mechanical heartbeat. The world outside moved forward, machines whirring, lights blinking, emails stacking up, but inside this quiet pocket of time, he held in his hands something that refused to be rushed: Leo's notebook. He opened it with the same caution one might reserve for a sacred artifact. The first page was dated over 7 years ago. The handwriting was neat, consistent, almost meditative. The ink had faded slightly at the edges, and the pages carried the faintest scent of citrus and cleaning supplies, a strange combination that somehow made it feel even more real. The first entry read, "May 3rd. I saw a woman cry in her car before work this morning. No one noticed but me. I thought about knocking on her window, but I just left a coffee on the hood. She never knew it was me. I think I like it better that way." Elon paused, then turned the page. June 12th. Sometimes I feel like a ghost in this place. Not in a sad way, more like I float between parts that other people miss. There's something peaceful about being invisible. It's where I do my best watching. And I don't mean spying. I mean witnessing. Page after page, the entries unfolded like poetry written by someone who never cared about applause. Elon read about Leo's routines, his favorite mop, nicknamed Charlie, the creaky tile in corridor C, the way the vending machine refused to take crumpled bills. But between the mundane, Elon saw a man building his own form of meaning. August 4th. My wife used to fold the laundry with her eyes closed, like a prayer. I think I started folding towels at work the same way. I miss her every day, but I like to imagine she'd smile knowing I still keep things tidy. It hit Elon like a gut punch. He remembered that name, Amelia, from the emergency contact forms. But he never knew the story. Never knew Leo had lost her to cancer 5 years ago. Never knew that cleaning was never just cleaning. It was grieving, remembering, holding on. October 9th. I saw Elon today. He walked past with that look he gets, like his thoughts are running so fast his body can't keep up. I wonder if he ever gets to rest. Not sleep, rest. Elon swallowed hard. That line stayed with him longer than he wanted to admit. And then came the humor. December 15th, someone tried to microwave a burrito still in the wrapper. The explosion hit the ceiling. Took me 20 minutes to clean it. Worth it for the smell. Smelled like college. January 3rd. Some intern thanked me today for holding the door. Made me feel like I'd won the lottery. Amazing how a single thank you can lift a whole damn week. By the time Elon reached the final pages, something in him had shifted. Not changed subtly, but softened, deepened. Leo had written of loneliness, of loss, of his love for jazz music and how he sometimes hummed Miles Davis while cleaning. Of dreams he no longer chased, not because they weren't worth chasing, but because he found quiet purpose where he stood. The second-to-last page read, "If anyone ever reads this, I hope they know I didn't mind the silence. I just wanted to leave the world a little more seen than I found it." Elon closed his eyes, then slowly turned to the final blank page. Without hesitation, he picked up a pen from his desk and wrote, "Leo, you saw us when we weren't looking. You gave without asking. You noticed what we missed. You held together this place in ways I never saw until now. I hope you find rest. I hope Amelia has her arms around you. And if anyone ever asks what a real legacy looks like, I'll show them this notebook. Thank you, Elon." He signed it slowly, folded a new sheet of paper, and slipped it into the back flap. On the envelope he wrote, "To Leo's family if they ever find this." That evening, Elon walked quietly to the Leo room. No entourage, no press, just him. He placed the notebook under the soft light of a new glass display case they had just installed on the far wall. A small bronze plaque had been affixed to the base. It read, "This belonged to a man who saw us and made us better for it." Elon stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, gaze steady. He wasn't thinking about the next launch, or the market, or the future. He was thinking about a janitor who had walked through the world gently, leaving no footprints, just soft light in the places people had forgotten to look. The Leo room had no formal hours, no manager, no guidelines, yet it was always open. What started as a tribute quietly became a sanctuary. At first, it was just a few people, employees slipping in during their lunch breaks, hands in pockets, heads bowed in thought. They'd read the stories on walls, stare at Leo's notebook behind the glass, maybe sit in silence for a few minutes before returning to their workstations. But over time, something shifted. People began leaving things, not just letters, tokens. A keychain shaped like a shoe with a note, "For the man who kept me walking when I didn't think I could." A folded napkin with the words, "You saw me," written in looping cursive. A child's crayon drawing of a rocket ship, left by an engineer with a sticky note, "My daughter thinks I build dreams. I do now thanks to him." A screwdriver, a harmonica, a tea bag, a poem about elevators. All seemingly random, yet deeply specific. Gifts for the unseen. Messages for someone who taught them that what you leave behind doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be real. And Leo had been real. He had walked through their world quietly enough to hear its heart. Elon visited the Leo room almost every evening now. Not to speak, just to listen. One evening, as twilight turned the windows gold, he sat cross-legged on the floor beside a maintenance technician named Claudia. She was wiping her eyes but smiling. "He used to leave fresh coffee in the break room before my 4 a.m. shift," she said. "Didn't know my name, but somehow knew I needed it." Elon nodded slowly. He saw the weight we all carry. Claudia looked over. "You really changed, you know." He chuckled softly. "Leo changed me." That week, Elon sent out one more invitation. Not a company-wide memo, just a private message to 50 employees chosen from every level and role. Longtime staff, new hires, frontline workers, office assistants, janitors, executives, engineers. The message simply said, let's gather. Let's talk about the people who never get the credit. No photos, no agenda, just presence. They met in the atrium under soft lights, seated in a circle, no podium, no title badges. At first, the room was tentative, polite silence. But then someone broke it, a man from custodial named Brian, who talked about how Leo once helped him fix his car in the parking lot, refusing to take anything in return. Then a senior engineer confessed he used to feel invisible during team meetings until Leo once stopped him in the hallway and said, "That graph you drew last week? I like the colors. Made the future feel friendlier." People laughed. Some wiped tears. An executive shared how Leo used to leave peppermint candies on her desk during crunch weeks. A cafeteria worker said Leo always saved the last banana for him, knowing he worked better with potassium. The stories wove themselves like a quilt, patches of humanity stitched together across roles and ranks. And in that circle, titles dissolved. People weren't managers or analysts or assistants. They were simply people who had been seen, often for the first time. Elon waited until the room quieted. Then he raised his glass, not champagne, just lemon water, and said, "To the ones who hold us together when we think we're falling apart. To those who leave light without needing credit. To the ones who stay behind and sweep up the mess, inside and out. To Leo." Everyone echoed, "To Leo." And for the first time in the company's history, a janitor's name echoed louder than any product launch. As the gathering dispersed, Elon stayed behind. He was placing chairs back when a young man approached quietly. Maybe 24, fresh out of college, wearing a badge that said Eric, software intern. "Mr. Musk," he said, voice tentative. Elon turned. "Just Elon." Eric smiled nervously. "I just wanted to say, I almost quit last week. Was feeling like none of this mattered. That I was just another cog in a machine too big to care." Elon didn't speak, just listened. Eric continued, "Then I read Leo's letter. And I thought maybe we don't have to be seen by everyone. Just one person, just once. And maybe that's enough." Elon looked at him, eyes steady. "It is." They shook hands. No formality, no speech, just a silent passing of something sacred. No one expected the photo to go viral. It wasn't taken by a journalist or anyone with a blue checkmark. It came from a quiet visitor, a cousin of a Tesla engineer, who wandered into the Leo room one afternoon and snapped a picture of the notebook behind the glass. No flash, no filters, just the soft glow of the case and the words engraved beneath it. "This belonged to a man who saw us and made us better for it." They posted it on a small personal blog with a short caption. "I've been crying in parking lots for months. This room made me feel okay again. Thank you, Leo, whoever you are." Within days, the image was shared thousands of times. By morning baristas, by nurses coming off double shifts, by school teachers on forums titled, "Things That Still Matter." And with every repost came more stories. Stories of quiet janitors who left snacks on desks without asking. Of elderly neighbors who watered plants when no one noticed. Of co-workers who simply said, "You look tired today. You okay?" Suddenly, Leo wasn't just Leo. He was every unseen kindness people had once received and never known how to honor. The quote in his notebook, "You don't have to build something to change someone," was scribbled onto post-it notes, classroom chalkboards, whiteboards in hospitals, and handmade signs taped to lockers. A bus driver in Detroit printed it and taped it above the windshield. A teacher in Dublin wrote it on her arm in marker before leading her students in a writing exercise. Who is your Leo? Back at Tesla, Elon sat in his office reading message after message sent to the corporate inbox, notes not about cars or delays or refunds, but about love, about presence, about being seen. At first, he was reluctant. He didn't want Leo turned into a headline. He didn't want this to become some branded moment. But the public was already past that. They didn't need marketing. They just needed permission to care out loud. Eventually, Elon agreed to a short interview. No stage, no production, just him seated in the Leo room, facing a single camera. He looked directly into the lens and said, Leo wasn't a campaign. He wasn't a symbol. He was a man who did his job with humility, grace, and care. He changed the way I lead, not because he taught me how to run a company, but because he showed me what it means to pay attention. He listened without interrupting. He noticed without being noticed. And he reminded me that our greatest responsibility isn't to be remembered, but to remember each other. He paused, then added, if you've had a Leo in your life, go tell them. Today. That was it. The clip was viewed over 30 million times in the first week. Hashtags emerged. Murals were painted. Podcasts debated the shift from hustle culture to Leo culture. But inside Elon, something more personal was stirring. Not pride, not influence, but a need to complete the circle. He asked one of his assistants to help him track down Leo's last known address. It wasn't far, a quiet, aging apartment complex tucked behind a supermarket in Hawthorne. Modest, weather-worn, a building with screen doors that squeaked and wind chimes made from old forks. When Elon arrived, he stood for a long moment outside the gate, notebook in hand. The superintendent was a tall man with soft eyes and a voice like gravel. He recognized Elon immediately, but didn't make a fuss. "You here for Leo?" he asked. Elon nodded. "Just wanted to see where he lived." The man smiled faintly. "Always paid on time. Always asked about my grandkids." He had a chair by the window where he read the paper like it was scripture. He paused, then added, "He left something behind for you. Said if anyone ever came asking, to give it to the one who stayed behind after the letter." From a drawer behind the office desk, he pulled out a small, taped cardboard box. On top was written in blue pen, "Just in case someone came looking." Elon held it like it was something holy. Inside, beneath layers of tissue, was a single photograph. Leo and Amelia, arms around each other, standing in front of a lemon tree in bloom. She wore a yellow dress. He wore a crooked smile. The back of the photo read, "Everything I ever cleaned, I did for her." Elon's throat tightened. Beneath the photo, a second envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside was a final note. "You saw me. That's all I ever wanted. If you're reading this, thank you for staying long enough to understand." No signature. He didn't need one. Elon looked up at the window where Leo once sat with his paper and the sunset, and whispered, "I see you now." Elon never expected the hardest part would be dialing a phone number. But there he was, sitting alone in a quiet corner of the building, staring at a contact his assistant had found after hours of delicate research. Her name was Carmen Rivera, Leo's niece, the last living relative listed on any official paperwork. She lived in Pasadena, taught English at a local high school, and had once spent every summer at Leo and Amelia's small garden apartment. When she picked up, her voice was warm but cautious. "Elon Musk?" she asked, half disbelieving. He cleared his throat. "Yes. I worked with Leo." There was silence, then a soft chuckle. "You mean he worked with you?" He smiled, caught. "Yes, that's more accurate." They arranged to meet on a quiet Saturday afternoon at a small family-owned cafe halfway between Pasadena and Hawthorne. Elon arrived early, ordered tea he didn't plan on drinking, and sat facing the door. When Carmen walked in, he recognized her immediately, not from photos, but from the way she carried herself. Straight spine, steady gaze, the kind of quiet confidence that reminded him of Leo. She approached and extended her hand. "He always spoke highly of you." Elon blinked. "He did." She nodded. "Not often, and not about rockets or stocks or headlines. He admired your persistence. Said you reminded him of an old watch he used to have, always ticking, even when the glass cracked." They sat, talked, and Carmen began to paint a portrait Elon hadn't yet seen. Leo as a boy, always with a notebook, always watching. The only kid in his neighborhood who memorized the names of every librarian. The boy who learned to play piano by ear in his church basement. The teenager who worked 3 jobs and still brought flowers home to his mother. The man who fell in love with Amelia after she corrected his grammar during a jazz radio call-in. She was his melody, Carmen said, smiling through misty eyes. When she got sick, he never left her side. Not once. He bathed her, fed her, sang to her, and after she passed, he stopped playing. Elon leaned in. He never mentioned music. He wouldn't. It was private, sacred. She reached into her bag and placed a small plastic case on the table. Inside, a worn cassette tape. Handwritten label, for Amelia, 2004. He recorded this a few months before she died. He never played it for anyone, just left it with a note that said, "In case someone ever needs to remember why we stay." Carmen slid it toward him. Elon hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded. He left it for someone who'd understand. They parted with a quiet hug. No promises, no formality, just a shared reverence for a man who had touched them both in different ways. That night, back at his office, Elon rummaged through old storage until he found what he needed, an ancient cassette player tucked behind outdated tech demos and tangled cables. He wiped the dust from its surface, inserted the tape, and pressed play. The static faded into a soft, hesitant chord, then a second, then a melody, imperfect human, full of breath and pause. Notes danced like candlelight, fragile but certain. It wasn't virtuosic. It didn't need to be. It was love, pressed into magnetic tape, grief and gratitude and memory stitched into sound. Elon closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long, long while, he cried. Not for the company, not for the future, not for what was broken, but for what was beautiful, for what had stayed. For Leo, the invitation was simple. No RSVP, no dress code, just a soft-textured paper card slipped discreetly into inboxes and mail slots across Tesla's main campus. It read, "In memory of a man who moved quietly through our lives and changed us anyway. Join us in the courtyard at sunset. No speeches, just stories, just presence." The date matched what would have been Leo's 64th birthday. There was no stage that day, no spotlight, no flashy screen countdown or musical cue. Just a semicircle of folding chairs set beneath the sycamore tree in the main courtyard, and in the center, a small speaker on a stool next to a wooden box containing Leo's cassette tape. People came, hundreds of them. Engineers in wrinkled polos, janitors in clean uniforms, executives with undone ties, cafeteria staff still in aprons. Even some of Leo's family, Carmen, his brother Miguel, and two nephews who wore sneakers far too big for their feet. No one handed out programs, but on each seat there was a folded letter written by Leo's colleagues, curated over the last month by volunteers. Some were short, others spilled across pages. All were real. And when the sun dipped low behind the western wall of the campus, Elon stepped forward, not to speak, but to press play. The first notes of the tape filled the air like a prayer. Leo's melody, imperfect, tender, alive. People closed their eyes. Some held hands. Carmen wept openly beside her uncle. Elon remained still, his hands folded in front of him, eyes fixed on the wind rustling through the tree above them. After the tape faded, a small screen near the base of the tree began to softly cycle through handwritten pages, notes submitted by people across the company. "You didn't say much, Leo, but you always held the elevator. You once told me, don't be ashamed of slow progress. It's still movement. I wrote that on my mirror. I don't remember what you said. I just remember feeling better every time you passed by." One by one, employees stood, not in any particular order, and read the letters they had chosen. A shy software developer read a thank you from someone Leo had helped fix a bike tire in the parking lot. A security guard spoke of how Leo left him a granola bar every night during his shifts. A cafeteria worker described how Leo once danced in the back kitchen to make a crying barista laugh. They laughed, cried, applauded gently when appropriate, but mostly they listened. And when the letters were done, Elon stepped forward one last time, not to speak, but to place something beneath the tree, a small, polished stone. On it, etched in Leo's handwriting, were the words, "Leave the world more seen than you found it." Soon, others began to follow. One by one, they laid down their own offerings: folded paper cranes, keychains, hand-drawn sketches, flower petals, and scraps of notes. The base of the tree transformed into a mosaic of remembrance, not a monument of marble, but one made of moments. And Elon, he didn't go back to the office right away. He stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, watching the people Leo had once watched in silence. Watching as they now watched each other. The sun finally dipped behind the building, casting a long shadow through the courtyard. But no one rushed to leave, because some silences weren't meant to be filled. They were meant to be shared. The ripple was gentle but undeniable. After the tribute beneath the sycamore tree, something within Tesla began to settle into a new rhythm, not slower, not less driven, but more aware. Conversations became just a bit longer. People began remembering birthdays, asking second questions when someone said they were fine, leaving small notes of encouragement on computer screens and lockers. And it didn't stop at Tesla. A few weeks after the tribute, a senior manager from another tech company posted a photo of the Leo room on LinkedIn, writing, "What if every company had a room like this?" The post exploded. Comments poured in, some from HR leaders, others from developers, janitors, teachers, nurses. Soon, other companies began calling Tesla, not about partnerships or products, but about culture. How do we start something like this? What are the rules? Does it have to be named Leo? Elon's answer was always the same: no rules. Just remember someone. At a quiet leadership forum in New York, Elon was invited to speak. The audience expected talk of innovation, disruption, rockets. Instead, he told them about cleaning rags, and music tapes, and paper cups of coffee left anonymously by a man who noticed when no one else did. He ended the talk with a pause, then said, "Impact isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks slowly late at night, mop in hand, and leaves the world better without anyone watching." The room stood, not for a product launch, but for a lesson they didn't know they needed. Back at Tesla, the Leo culture kept growing, quietly, organically. Someone installed a corkboard in the hallway labeled "Small Things Matter." Notes appeared daily. To whoever leaves the plant on the windowsill watered, thank you. To the one who fixed the loose doorknob, even though it wasn't your job. To the woman who hums jazz near the vending machine, you make my days softer. And in a tucked-away server folder titled Legacy, a group of interns began archiving these moments. No metrics, just meaning. Meanwhile, Carmen Rivera, Leo's niece, sat at her kitchen table one Sunday afternoon and wrote an article titled, "My Uncle, the Janitor Who Changed Elon Musk." It was published by a national magazine and quickly spread across teacher forums, parenting blogs, even a Sunday sermon in rural Georgia. In it, she wrote, "Leo didn't leave behind millions. He didn't leave behind patents or patents pending. But he left something even rarer, a space where we could slow down enough to feel human again. A room built not with bricks or policy, but with quiet dignity." And later, he taught Elon and all of us that the most radical thing you can do is truly see someone. Not manage them, not optimize them, just see them. A week later, Elon sat in the back of a crowded red-eye flight, hoodie up, reading the article on a printed page. He didn't like reading screens on planes. Too much glare. A sleeping man snored beside him. The hum of the engines filled the silence. He reached into his bag, pulled out a pen, and underlined the line, "Seeing someone is the most radical thing you can do." Then he smiled, not for what Leo had done for Tesla, but for what Leo had done for him. The first letter came in a brown envelope with hand-drawn stars across the border. No return address. Just a school in Nagano, Japan, and a child's careful handwriting. Inside was a folded sheet with a message that read, "We have a wall now. It's called the Leo Wall. We write notes to the people who are kind in small ways." I wrote one for the janitor at our school. He cried and smiled at the same time. "Thank you for showing us how to see him." Elon placed the letter on the edge of his desk, unsure what to say. But then came another, and another. Soon, the desk wasn't enough. They arrived in every language, from corners of the world Elon had never visited. A nurse in Brazil wrote about creating a quiet room at her hospital where families could leave thank you notes for custodial staff. A mayor in Nova Scotia declared September 7th Day of Recognition in their town, a day to acknowledge the ones who keep our world from falling apart silently. A high school counselor in Illinois created a class assignment: write a letter to someone who changed you without knowing it. One student wrote to his grandfather, one to a lunch lady, one to a stranger who returned his lost dog. And in the middle of all this, Elon sat at his desk each night, sleeves rolled up, ink smudged on his palms, writing back. By hand. Not for PR, not to build brand trust, but because some moments deserve more than a keyboard. Dear Kenji, he wrote one night, responding to a 10-year-old in Tokyo, your drawing made me smile. I hope you always keep watching with your heart. Leo would have liked you very much. He signed each letter simply, your friend Elon. No title, no business card, just presence. One afternoon, Elon visited a school on the east side of Los Angeles. A teacher had reached out, saying her students had been deeply moved by Leo's story. He arrived unannounced, quietly stepping into a classroom of 30 wide-eyed sixth graders. They expected science. Instead, they got silence. He told them the story, not about rockets or companies, but about a man with a mop, a notebook, and a soul too big to measure. When he finished, no one clapped. They just sat there, thinking. And then, one child passed a small note forward. A simple thank you. Written in pencil, folded in quarters. It reached Elon's hand slowly, passed from one student to the next. He held it in both palms like it was made of glass. And in that quiet room full of growing hearts and open eyes, he smiled. Because Leo wasn't just being remembered, he was being multiplied. It began with a question: how do we thank the people who never ask for thanks? Elon had posed it to a small group, just 6 people. A custodian, an engineer, a community organizer, a school counselor, a Tesla staffer, and Carmen Rivera. No executives, no consultants. Just hearts in a room that understood what Leo represented. After hours of listening and reflection, someone said, what if we didn't ask them to apply? What if we just noticed them? And that's how the Leo Grant was born. No press release, no launch event, no website, just envelopes, carefully sealed, hand-delivered or mailed, with no logos, only a handwritten message. You've been seen. Thank you for lifting quietly. Inside, a personal note, a short story of how they were found, and a financial gift large enough to make something easier or possible. The first grant went to a janitor at a hospital in Chicago named Halima. She worked nights, used her lunch breaks to visit patients with no family, left fresh flowers in the ICU when she could afford them. She cried when she opened the envelope, said she never expected to be noticed. Another went to a woman in Oaxaca who repaired shoes for free outside church. She said she didn't want a business, just a purpose. She used the money to buy better tools and a small heater for the kids who came by with no socks. A third went to a bus driver in Detroit. He kept bags of food and socks in his glove box for unhoused riders. When asked why, he said, no one should ride alone and hungry. Each recipient was chosen by stories submitted through whispers, not platforms. A teacher would mention someone. A neighbor would write a note. A child would draw a picture. The team followed breadcrumbs of quiet service. Elon read every profile, every one, late at night, early in the morning, with tears sometimes forming at the corners of his eyes as he whispered, they're everywhere, aren't they? People who built the world in silence, who held it together without applause. He began keeping a journal, not to track data, but to remember names. He wanted to know them all. One entry read, Grant number 42, Sheila, sweeps the school before students arrive, bakes birthday muffins for teachers, never told anyone. Another, Grant number 57, Marco, leaves umbrellas on benches when it rains. No one's ever seen him do it. These weren't just recipients. They were echoes of Leo. And eventually, Elon knew there was one more journey he needed to make. He didn't ask anyone to come with him. He drove alone. A small cemetery in Modesto, California. Row 4, Plot 17. The gravestone was simple. Granite. Clean. Amelia R., 1958 to 2015. My melody in a loud world. Elon knelt beside it, brushing away a single leaf. In his hand, he held a yellow flower, the same kind Leo had mentioned once in a note describing Amelia's favorite spring bloom. He placed it gently at the base of the stone. No speech, no performance, just a whisper. He kept his promise. Then he stood and walked back to the world Leo had helped make better, not through invention, but through intention. It was just past 5 p.m. when Elon returned to the Leo room. He hadn't planned to. Meetings had run late, calls had stretched on, and a dozen new emails blinked on his phone. But something tugged, something quieter than a notification, more insistent than a deadline. Soy foi. The lights were dimmed, as they always were, to protect the softness of what lived there now. No one ever turned them all the way up anymore. That room had its own rhythm, gentle, warm, deliberate. He expected it to be empty, but it wasn't. A small crowd had gathered. Half a dozen employees, some standing, some kneeling, all of them surrounding something on the floor. Elon stepped closer. It was a drawing, done in crayon on lined notebook paper, slipped beneath the glass case that held Leo's notebook. The image was simple, unmistakable. A stick figure in a cape, mop in one hand, a big L on his chest, a smile drawn so wide it broke the lines of the face. Above it, the child had written, "Leo the quiet superhero." No one spoke, not at first. Then one person bent down and gently laid something next to the drawing, a faded childhood sketch of a rocket ship. Another added a stick figure self-portrait from years ago, folded from a wallet. Soon, a dozen drawings lay beside Leo's. Acts of vulnerability, offered not in shame, but in shared reverence. It was no longer just a tribute to Leo. It had become a space where people remembered who they were before the world told them to grow up and go faster. Elon stood quietly, watching happen. Then he felt a presence at his side. "Teresa," the woman said, offering her hand. He shook it. "You've worked here a long time, haven't you?" 17 years. They sat side by side on the bench near the wall. "I was going to quit once," Teresa said softly. "After I lost my baby." Elon turned, listening. "No one knew. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't have words for it. But Leo, he just started showing up." "Showing up?" Elon asked gently. "Every night after my shift ended. Didn't say anything. Just sat beside me in the break room. Left a peppermint tea on the bench. That's all. For weeks." She paused. Her voice broke just a little. It was the only thing that didn't feel like pretending. Elon didn't say a word, just nodded slowly, his hands resting on his knees. They looked toward the tree outside, visible through the window. Leo's tree, its branches swaying slightly in the breeze, golden light filtering through. Without a word, they stood and walked out together. They sat beneath the tree, didn't speak, didn't explain. They just shared the silence, the kind Leo would have loved. They wanted him to talk about innovation, about space, about the next frontier. The invitation had come with fanfare, the Global Leadership Summit on Humanity and Progress, a summit attended by presidents, tech founders, billionaires, influencers. Elon had spoken there before, always with graphs and projections, always with ideas built for scale. But this year he brought a story and a notebook. No PowerPoint, no demo video, just a photograph of a quiet man standing beside a mop bucket. The audience, thousands deep, shuffled in their velvet seats. Cameras blinked, phones ready. Elon adjusted the mic and began. There was a man who worked in silence. His name was Leo. He spoke plainly, no script, just truth, about how Leo mopped the same hallway every night for years, about the letter Leo left behind, about a room that changed a company. a melody that broke a heart open. He talked about presence, about how seeing someone could be more radical than solving an algorithm. The hall fell still. No coughing, no note-taking, just listening. He told them about the Leo grant, about the janitors, bus drivers, and shoemakers changing the world with acts too small for the news. When he finished, he didn't take questions. He just said, "I thought I was building the future. Turns out, I was just catching up to someone who already understood it." The applause didn't come right away, but when it did, it wasn't loud. It was long. That night, Elon returned to his hotel room, his tie loosened, jacket off. The window was open. The city below glittered like data, but he wasn't thinking about that. His phone buzzed. A voice message. "Carmen, hey, I visited the tree tonight. Just me and the moonlight." Someone left a new note. Handwritten. No name. It said, "I never met Leo, but I know him, because I've been waiting my whole life to be seen like that." There was silence on the recording. Then Carmen whispered, "I think Leo's still working, just in other ways." Elon replayed the message once, then again, then a third time. He didn't respond, just looked out at the sky beyond the glass, and said quietly to himself, "So have I." The courtyard was still dark when Elon arrived. The moon hadn't yet surrendered to morning, and the lamps along the walkway glowed a soft amber, casting long, gentle shadows across the pavement. The city behind him still slept, but something in Elon had stirred before the alarms and the emails. He needed silence. He needed Leo. He walked past the glass lobby, past the quiet hallways of innovation, until he reached the courtyard. And there it was, unchanged, Leo's tree, its branches swaying slightly in the cool breeze, as if it knew. The bench beneath it was empty. He sat down slowly, not with the weight of exhaustion, but with a kind of reverence, like entering a sacred place. He folded his hands, closed his eyes, let the stillness rise around him like a tide. When he opened his eyes, something caught his attention. A small, folded piece of paper, carefully tucked beside him on the bench. He picked it up. No envelope, no name, just a single sentence on the front. "For you, if you're still listening." Elon unfolded it. Inside was a letter, written in shaky but deliberate script. "I watched you speak yesterday. I wasn't supposed to be in the room. I snuck in. I don't work in tech. I'm just a server at the hotel where the summit was held. I've wanted to quit more times than I can count. Not because of the job, because I felt like no one saw me, not even myself anymore. Then you said his name, Leo, and I stayed. I don't know why this note ended up here. Maybe because I heard Tesla has a tree now. Maybe because I needed to leave something behind, too. Tell him thank you, and thank you for seeing us." Elon read it once, twice, a third time, then folded it with care, hands trembling just slightly. The sky had begun to shift, lavender spilling into the edges of night, the first hints of day peeking over the horizon. And in that quiet, sacred moment, he noticed movement nearby. It was Teresa, walking the grounds in her soft-soled shoes, her cleaning cart rolling gently behind her. She moved like Leo once had, steady, invisible to those who rushed, essential to everything that worked. She looked up, met his eyes. They nodded to one another. No words, just recognition. When the sun was fully risen, Elon rose from the bench, the letter still in hand, and walked back inside. He entered the Leo room alone. The paper cranes still hung from the ceiling. The drawings still lined the walls. He stepped to the glass case where Leo's notebook rested and carefully opened the hidden flap where a few other messages now lived. He placed the new letter inside, not to archive it, but to pass it forward, because someone else would need it one day. And when they found it, they'd know they weren't alone. Months had passed, not in a blur, but in gentle unfolding. The Leo room had become more than a place. It had become a pause in the rhythm of Tesla, one that neither executives nor interns skipped anymore. New hires were quietly told, go there, not for training, for remembering. Visitors from other companies walked in with curiosity and walked out slower, softer. one small addition had reshaped the room. It began with a bowl of smooth, round wooden tokens. No instructions, no labels, just a quiet prompt beside them. Leave one word, just one, the one that stayed with you. At first, the tokens came in slowly. Hope, light, seen, steady, enough. Then they multiplied. Soon, the branches of Leo's tree, real and sculpted alike, held hundreds. Tiny wooden discs, each with a story hidden in a single word. Some were carved, some painted, some shaky with emotion. Elon walked the path through the courtyard often now, not to check on progress, but to remember presence. One morning, he stopped to read them all. Grace, stillness, Amelia, safe, quiet, mop, yes, Leo. He smiled at each one. He lingered on a small, pale token tucked behind a leaf. It simply read, begin. Later that day, back in his office, he placed one of the tokens, stillness, beside his computer. Not as decor, but as direction. It reminded him to lead slower, to speak less, to listen harder. But eventually the time came. An overseas trip, long demanding, necessary. Before leaving, Elon took one final walk through the Leo room. It was dusk again, that beautiful hour when light turns gold and memory feels alive. He stood by the glass case one more time, looked down at Leo's notebook, now worn with fingerprints from hundreds of reverent hands. Inside the flap were dozens of new letters, drawings, postcards, every one of them from someone who had been changed not by a system, but by a soul. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his own token, smooth, simple, burned around the edges from where he'd worked it himself in the garage, engraved with one word, seen. He hung it from the lowest branch of the tree, then turned back toward the threshold. At the doorway, he paused. No audience, no phones, no one waiting, just him. And he whispered for no one but the room to hear, "Thank you for staying." Then he left, and Leo stayed, not as a ghost, but as a guide. If this story meant something to you, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment with your city below, and maybe even the name of a Leo in your life. And hey, if you haven't already, consider subscribing. Not for numbers, but so you don't miss the next story that just might change you, too. Thank you for watching.